Welcome to this latest beachside spectacular from All for Unity with me, George Galloway. We've been coast to coast over and over again throughout the South Scotland constituency in this election campaign like no other, and which comes to an end on Thursday. Thank you very much, all of you who have come. This is definitely our biggest crowd of the election campaign. I'm not sure if it's even legal. It's so significant, but mainly it's my fellow candidates, Doc Halliday, who's with me on the South Scotland list, Christian McNeil, David Griffiths. We've even got the Meatloaf Tribute Act, Pete Loaf, which I think is wonderfully Scottish. Maybe we'll ask Pete Loaf to do a turn at the end of this. Might even get a bigger audience than me. They say that you play at the seafront in TROON twice in your career, once on the way up and once on the way down. It's good to be back. Actually, I'm hoping that I'm not on the way down, but whether I am or whether I'm not, I'm extremely happy to be back in TROON for lots of reasons. First of all, it's exquisitely beautiful, and when it's possible to do so without Nicola Sturgeon warning you not to go into the cafes or bars, I ask everyone in Britain to visit Scotland and to visit this jewel of TROON. But partly also because the very first election I ever won was in TROON. I'm not making that up. At the Labour conference in 1975, at the age of 21, I was elected for the first time to the Labour Party's Scottish Executive Committee. After a recount, I hope there's no recounts on Thursday. There had to be a reballot, actually, because it was a dead heat. And I then defeated my late friend, Gerald O'Brien, in the runoff. So this will always have very happy memories for me. Those were the days, 1975, when Labour was Labour, when Scotland was Labour, when I was Labour, and when Willie Ross, the Ayrshirman personified, basso profundo, we called him because of his literally wondrous, rich voice. When Willie Ross, when you were in his company, you felt you were in the company of the King of Scotland, and indeed in many ways you were, because Labour was absolutely unchallengeable in those days. And with a leadership like Labour had at that time here in Scotland, it was not difficult to see why. The SNP were cranks in those days, a fringe group of people in tweeds and tartans. And if you told me then that the day would come when the motley crew, who are certainly not the tweed and tartan brigade, in fact, some of them prefer fetish gear to tweeds and tartans, coming at you with a gimp mask on. But don't tempt me too far down these dark alleyways. The SNP then and now are completely unrecognizable, the one from the other. But then so are Labour. Willie Ross has not been well replaced in recent years at the top of the Labour Party. Come to think of it, neither has the Conservative Party been well served in the last period, at least, by its new leader. And I'll come back to some of the dreadful mistakes that Douglas Ross, the linesman, has made in his election campaign. But I'm happy to be here. In fact, I'm happy to be anywhere, because it's looked once or twice in this campaign that I might not live to see the end of it, because scarcely a day goes by without Scottish nationalist extremists threatening my life and limb and forcing me in some cases to decamp literally from my house with my wife and my small children. It's no joke, actually. I don't know whether to laugh or cry at this point, but I was with Police Scotland till 2 o'clock in the morning this morning. They are having to send patrols around my house because yet another Scottish nationalist extremist threatened to violently attack me, if not kill me. And I have to say to you, by the way, that's something else that in 1975 could not possibly have been imagined. The idea that the SNP with their brogues and their tweeds and their tartans would contain such a significant number of such extreme people, that there just must be, and I hope there is, a section of special branch keeping a very close eye on them. Apparently, thousands of people who, disappointed that the war in Ireland is over, would now like to stage that kind of conflict here in Scotland. And the Ulsterization of Scottish politics is gathering pace. And what's happened to me is just a taster of what could happen in certain circumstances, which I shall describe if we are not very careful. But I want to say this to the people of Scotland: do not go quietly into that good night. The language of civil war, the threats that sound like civil war, could, in the worst circumstances, actually be civil war, at least civil conflict, on a scale that we don't wish to imagine. Think Catalonia at best. Bit of pushing and shoving, some arrests, people going into exile, organizations being proscribed, and so on. That's the best case. The worst case is not that far away in Northern Ireland, although there are even worse cases that are hopefully entirely inconceivable. Scotland as Yugoslavia is not something anybody should be sanguine about, because there would be much blood in those circumstances. You may think I'm being dramatic, but hey, I'm the guy that a man was convicted last Monday for 3 times in public, in his own name, saying he was going to put a bullet in my head. An ex-soldier of 63 years old. Not just my head, Douglas Ross's head, the leader of the Conservative Party in Scotland. Lord Michael Forsyth, the former Secretary of State for Scotland, he was going to put a bullet in his head also. So forgive me if I am anxious about the state of Scottish politics, and that's before Thursday and the results next weekend. I'm anxious about it because I know, after a long life in politics, that this kind of thing is where nationalism ends. Because nationalism depends on othering other people. And the other people in this case are obviously English people. The ones that have been told by the First Minister not to come to Scotland, but if they do, not to go in to our cafes or bars. A warm Scottish welcome. You may think not. The othering, of course, doesn't stop at English people. If it did, they wouldn't be threatening me. I'm not English. I was born here in this country. I was educated here. I represented here in the Westminster Parliament for some years and might have gone on doing so if Tony Blair had not expelled me from the Labour Party and then abolished my constituency just in case. I'm not English, but I'm othered too. I'm othered because I am held by the nationalist extremists to be, in their Irish kind of talk, a Brit nat. Ugly word, ugly idea. The fact that I'm not any kind of nat is immaterial. The fact that if a Brit nat is bad, why is a Scot nat good, is a question of logic they never explore. I'm against the breakup of Britain, not because I'm a Brit nat, because I'm not. I'm against the breakup of Britain for two reasons. The first one is very easily stated. Because the Scottish people voted against breaking up Britain, just historically speaking, a heartbeat ago, in what was supposed to be a once-in-a-lifetime referendum that everyone signed they would respect the result. Sometimes they said once in a generation, but it was only 7 years ago, which is not even the generation of a domestic rabbit. So that's the first reason why I'm against the breakup of Britain. But the second reason is, I think it would be bad for Scotland. I think it would be bad for the people of Scotland. It would be bad for Britain, yes, of course. And that's why some of these people support it. Not because they love Scotland, but because they hate Britain. But it would be bad, almost beyond measure, for Scotland. Our people would be devastated by separatism, adrift out of the United Kingdom and out of the European Union. In the latter case, maybe forever. In the best case, at least a decade of devastating austerity, turbulence, and trouble. I don't want that for my people. That makes me a patriot, actually. Not a traitor, a patriot, because I don't want poverty, turmoil, and trouble for my own people, because I am of them and they are of me. But that makes me a target. I'm here surrounded not just by this lovely crowd, but by guards. I have to be, because I couldn't come here without announcing I was coming here, or none of the media would be here. But having announced that I was coming here, I can't be here without guards. Just think about that. Did you think Scotland would come to that? Did I think in 1975, when I was elected here, that Scotland would come to that? But it could get worse. it could get very much worse. If the SNP, despite their record of almost unparalleled failure, were to be returned to office on Thursday, first of all, that would be a democratic monstrosity, because they've called this election like no other, but for most of it, completely prohibited the rest of us from campaigning, while the First Minister, live on television, every single day, was able to, under the guise of coronavirus briefings, proselytize for her real purpose, which is, as always, separatism and breaking the country up. But it would be a democratic monstrosity for other reasons. First of all, it would be secured on a minority of the vote. I'll bet you my house on that. But it will be claimed as if it is a mandate of, what's that phrase Ian Blackford always reaches for? The people of Scotland. But of course, it will be no such thing. That's why Douglas Ross in the Scottish Conservative statement yesterday was so overwhelmingly stupid. He said if the SNP get a majority, that will guarantee another independence referendum. But of course, it will not. There will still be nothing like a majority of the people of Scotland wishing another independence referendum, which frankly we need, like we need a hole in the head. We're not even out of the pandemic yet. We haven't even started to tackle the economic carnage that will follow the pandemic. Not even 20% of SNP voters want another independence referendum in the foreseeable future. Mind you, Nicola Sturgeon says she's not going to do it right away. She's not going to do it for 100 days. That's 3 months grace she's given you. And I give you this assurance. If the SNP win a majority on Thursday, they will quickly plunge this country into a constitutional crisis, and to hell with the coronavirus, and to hell with the economic ruin that inevitably will accompany it. So Douglas Ross was very stupid in giving such a boost to nationalist propagandists yesterday. I wish I could say I was surprised. But the conduct of the Scottish Tory party, who don't even really seem to be conservatives to me, they seem to hate Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak and his government as much as the SNP say that they hate them, even though they're quite keen on the half crown. They might hate the crown, but they love the half crown from London and from the Chancellor, Mr. Sunak. The conduct of this campaign by the old parties, we are proud to be a new party, actually only 3 months old on the register of parties in Scotland. The conduct of the old parties is what has really let Scotland down. Nationalists are nationalists. They'll always be like this. But the so-called opposition, or as my good friend Jamie Blackett calls them, appeasition, the conduct of the opposition in failing to agree to stand down in constituencies where they had no earthly chance of winning, but may very well assist the SNP in winning, is an historic disgrace that will never be forgiven. If Anas Sarwar doesn't beat Nicola Sturgeon in the south side of Glasgow, because the third placed Conservative and the fourth placed Liberal Democrat cost him the chance of defeating her, that will never be forgiven. If in Edinburgh Central, the next leader of the SNP, Agnes Robertson, gets in because the third placed Labour and the fourth placed Liberal Democrat get enough votes to allow the SNP to win on a minority of the vote, that too will be an historic, a disgrace. But there's still everything to play for, you know. Just because the parties failed to agree doesn't mean you can't do the job for them. You're the one with the vote, not them. You can go to the polls on Thursday and you can vote for the person best placed to defeat the SNP, even if you don't like them, even if you don't like their party, even if you have to hold your nose, you can do it. And I'm here to ask you to do it, however difficult you find it to be. I myself don't find it as difficult as I would have done in 1975, because Labour and the Conservatives are two cheeks of the same arse to me. I'm voting Conservative in my constituency because it's the Conservative or the SNP. Conservatives are for Christmas. Separatism is forever. So it's not that difficult for me, because the Labour guy is not really very much different to me from the Conservative. But if you want to supercharge that effect, if you want to super glue the union, then here's the way to do it. On the lilac or purple ballot paper, vote for the best placed anti-SNP candidate. And on the orange or peach colored ballot paper, vote for us, all for unity. We're third top on the ballot paper with our roundel, which looks somewhat like the mod roundel. There's one here, let me show you. That's what to look for. Look for that third top on every ballot paper in Scotland. Vote for All for Unity. And if you put me into the Holyrood Parliament, I'll tell you this, Nicola Sturgeon, her knees will turn to water. The last person she wants to see in Holyrood is me. That's why her supporters keep threatening to shoot me. Think about it. If you give me 8 members of the Scottish Parliament, maybe the balance of power in the Scottish Parliament, I promise you we'll change everything forever. We will save our Scotland, save our Britain. Now I'm joined, as people have been joining throughout the meeting, by the leader of our party, All for Unity, my running mate in South Scotland, former Major Jamie Blackett, a soldier, a farmer, a thinker, a writer, and his speeches are getting better and better and better throughout the campaign. So hang on and listen to him. Thank you very much for watching.
Well, thank you, George. Here we are in TROON on our soapbox tour. I've driven right the way across the south of Scotland to get here this morning, and I've seen hardly any posters for the SNP I've seen hardly any posters for any party, actually. I can't believe that the people of the south of Scotland are really happy with the status quo. I can't believe that they've lost interest in politics to the extent that they're not going to vote on Thursday, although it appeared that way. Scotland appears to be like a woman stuck in an abusive relationship with the SNP. Either people believe that there is no point in displaying posters, no point in voting, because they're stuck in that relationship forever with the SNP, or do they perhaps fear to put a poster up for any other party in case they get a brick through the window? Thursday is an opportunity for change. The tragedy is that the so-called unionist parties, the old unionist parties, only seem interested in coming second. They only seem interested, actually, in contesting the list votes, the so-called peach votes. Douglas Ross isn't even standing in a constituency. That's how much he seems to care about ousting the SNP on Thursday. Scotland is crying out for change. The Holyrood Parliament, that great architectural disappointment where MSPs don't even have parliamentary privilege, where they can hold Nicola Sturgeon to account. Holyrood needs to change. Holyrood needs to be reformed. Devolution needs to be brought closer to the people. The power and the money around the clique, the Sturgeon cronies, the clique at the heart of this government, that power needs to be given back to the people, back to the regional councils who are crying out for money to put into social care, into education. We need to bring change to Scotland, and Thursday is the last chance for 5 years to do that. So I'm asking you to give your first vote on the lilac ballot paper to the party most likely to boot the SNP out, and your second vote on the peach ballot paper to All for Unity, an alliance of Tories, Labour, Liberal people, people from the radical left like George Galloway, people who genuinely care about bringing change to Scotland and ending the never-endum by insisting that the Westminster government bring in a Clarity Act that ends that never-endum by tying down the conditions for any future referendum. We cannot go on like this year after year with Nicola Sturgeon promising to one half of the electorate that she's going to drag Scotland out of the UK and threatening to the other half of Scotland that she's going to break up Britain. Let us end the never-endum for good on Thursday. Second vote, All for Unity. Thank you.